with neuroscience, psychology, and faith, no other than Mr. Jonathan McLernon.
All right. It's funny to think about those things being blended together.
Yes. Well, welcome, Mr. Jonathan. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Uh, Absolutely. So I'm very passionate about just how, human beings in general. I think humans are fascinating and how we work. As you mentioned, I'm a Christian, so I think from a lens of faith, how we were created. Um, I think we're endlessly fascinating. And I don't think there's as much a conflict between science and faith as people think there is. And so I love learning how we work. A lot of it is born of my own struggles, my own challenges I've faced after going through various experiences in life. And so I've been able to kind of translate that into the work that I do with other people. So I blend, psychology, neuroscience. I also have a background in fitness and nutrition and sleep science as well. And so I feel like it's kind of like I have a lot of tools in my toolkit when I go to work with someone. And for me, everyone's kind of like a blank slate. They come to me and say, "Hey, I'd like some help. I'd like to improve some way in my life." And I go, "Awesome. Let's just get started. We'll figure this out. We'll figure out which lever is the one to pull to get you to where you want to go." And then it becomes a matter of just facilitation. So I often say to people, "I'm like a guide by your side, not a sage on the stage." Um, I use the analogy of like I'm kind of like a driving instructor. You already know how to drive a car typically. I'm not going to drive your car for you, but I'll be in the passenger seat. I'll be there to kind of facilitate your process. Might be able to show you how to get somewhere a little bit easier, a different route, that kind of thing. And it's something that I really really enjoy, and I feel very fortunate to be able to do that to make my living.
Mr. Jonathan McLernon, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about neuroscience of self sabotage. So, tell us, from a neuroscience perspective, is it self sabotage or self sabotage a malfunction, or is it a brain's ancient survival circuitry simply doing its job too well?
Yeah, it's not a brain malfunction at all. It's our brain working the way that it was wired to work. One of the things that's kind of fascinating is we I think that we're not that well wired for a modern world. So I think technology driven, a lot of super stimuli, whether that's screen based, whether that's hyper processed foods. We have access to just what every vice we could possibly have access to now, and it was not nearly so available in like previous human history. So that makes it challenging already. And then we think about our brain. One of its strongest and most powerful drives is to keep us safe and to keep us secure and to keep us alive. The more the conditions of life are predictable, the easier it is to keep us safe. And so on the surface, we'll look at a pattern of behavior and go, huh, why are they doing that? That doesn't seem to make sense. But that's because we're looking at it through a logical lens. When you look at it through a survival lens, keeping conditions the same give you a better chance of a more predictable and a better chance of survival. And so it's not really that uncommon. What happens though is when we don't understand what drives the behavior, we then start to create a story to try to explain the behavior. And we go, uh, I there must be something wrong with me. And usually it's a character thing, like I am a bad person, I have no willpower, I'm dot dot dot, whatever the story happens to be. And then what ends up happening is when we start to describe ourselves in those terms, we actually start to live out those terms. This concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, it probably doesn't work the way that people think, but there's a lot of truth to it. We behave in a way that is consistent with who we see ourselves to be. And the more times we tell ourselves a story about ourselves to describe ourselves, the more it becomes imprinted into who we see ourselves to be. And then our brain will unconsciously nudge us to behave in a way that's consistent with that. It's called identity congruence.
Interesting, Mr. Jonathan. So we often sabotage long term goals for a short
Mm.
term relief. How does the brain dopamine system reward the avoidance of stressful tasks?
Well, often the things that we choose to avoid. So let's just say the pursuit of typically some kind of goal long term actually requires delaying gratification or foregoing instant gratification, and often choosing to be uncomfortable in the pursuit of a bigger ideal. We have this phrase sometimes you hear that like you don't need motivation, you need discipline, and I disagree because I just say discipline's another flavor of motivation. Really, motivation is about dopamine, among other things. Dopamine's a key, brain neurotransmitter chemical that makes us feel pleasure, but it's also really important when it comes to learning. Um, So when you do something that gives you a really strong dopamine boost, you learn that, hey, this is an easy way to get pleasure. And so when we're tired, when we're stressed, when we're just worn out by life in general, and then you're presented with two options. One is to forego comfort and pleasure in pursuit of a higher ideal, or to just take care of the pleasure, like just take a hit of pleasure right now. It's a lot easier to choose take the pleasure hit right now. I'll use an analogy. It's like help people quit smoking, for example. And you'd think in 2025 or whatever, hey, why do people even still smoke when we have so much information about it? And it's really about the problem that smoking solves. So let's say the number one thing we think about with smoking probably is lung cancer, maybe secondarily cardiovascular disease. But it's like lung cancer could take 25 years to develop. But when I hear someone say I need a smoke, what I'm hearing is I need a break, I need relief, I need something right now to help me escape the discomfort of my present situation, not add to that discomfort by resisting the urge. And so that's really often what's taking place is our ability to regulate our behaviors diminished because we're tired, we're stressed, we're exhausted with life, and then presented with a choice to be more uncomfortable or less uncomfortable. We'll choose the less uncomfortable thing that involves pleasure, not because we're a bad person, but just because that's what a worn out brain will choose kind of by impulse or by default.
Mr. Jonathan, you mentioned hidden brain patterns. How does the
Mhm.
brain attachment a familiar identity, even a negative one like I'm a procrastinator, or actively resist change, creating a self fulfilling prophecy?
Yeah. Uh, we look to create a sense of identity. You go, why is that? Well, if we have a sense of like who we are, then it helps us to relate to the world that's around us. Like this is how I fit into the world around us. Now, what's really interesting is a lot of people don't think too much about this. It happens passively or by default, or we just kind of take life as it comes, and how we respond to it informs us about the kind of person that we are. And I think there's a real missed opportunity here because we can actually actively engage in the process of shaping our identity. It doesn't mean we're going to entirely change who we are. There's certain core personality traits that I hold that are going to be a part of who I am for the rest of my life. But there are certain other ones that are malleable or shapeable. Like I can do something about them. And so what I try to encourage people is like you can change the story you tell about yourself. So think about this idea of affirmations. Affirmations in one sense are a good idea. The challenge with like, hey, I'm bold, I'm beautiful, I'm strong, I'm this, I'm that. These are okay, but the key thing here is it has to be grounded in some kind of reality. For example, no amount of affirmations are going to turn me into a PGA level, like PGA Tour level professional golfer. I don't play golf. I'm 43 years old. There's no chance that I'm taking up golf. I'm going to somehow develop the skill level to play at a professional level. So, in other words, an affirmation in order because our brain is able to has a bit of a BS detector. It is able to determine whether or not like the thing that we're trying to do is grounded in reality or not. Limiting beliefs can sometimes inhibit what is actually possible, but we do have to be grounded in reality as well. And I think that's a key part of it. But we can we when we want to somehow change and better ourselves, we actually have a picture in our mind of, hey, if I embark on this path, this is the person I think I can become. Okay, that's a really powerful clue, right? That's fascinating. Let's try to capture that picture. I want you to describe out loud what you're picturing in your head of the kind of person you think it is possible for you to become. Beautiful. Record that. And then I actually want you to play that back to yourself every day, listening in your own voice to you describing and creating, because there's nothing that's been created that wasn't first a picture in somebody's head. So if you're picturing, I'm going to become this kind of person, I'm going to become maybe more disciplined around food, I'm going to get in better shape, I'm going to, however it is you want to improve, describe that. And then listen, because we have so many things bombarding our senses, telling us to consume vices, for example. And if we are not actively engaging the process of improving ourselves, we're probably going to be passively shaped by the forces that are influencing us.
In moments of temptation or stress, it can feel like a switch flips and our rational mind goes offline. What is actually happening in the brain during this hijack, and how can we create a pause between a trigger and sabotaging action?
That's a great way to describe it. Like it's like because I've experienced this before. I went through trauma, PTSD, fell into binge eating and food addiction, compulsive behaviors that at the time I didn't really have a good explanation for why it was happening, but it feels exactly like that sometimes, where you just black out. It's a type of coping, and we call this emotion focused coping. So there's kind of there's two broad categories of coping, for simplification purposes. We could call one problem focused coping, another one could be called emotion focused coping. So when we encounter a type of stress, we try to figure out, first of all, is this a threat and can I deal with it? Okay. And
Yes.
then from there, we have a choice. Do I tackle this as a problem? Like, can I try to solve the problem and regain a sense of agency? Do I have control of the situation? Or do I choose to navigate this by trying to change my emotional state? If it feels like it's a problem that I can't tackle, a problem that I can't solve, I'm more likely to choose emotion focused coping. And so I'm going to go for, maybe I'm going to watch a movie. Maybe I'm going to eat some junk food. I'm going to maybe have a drink of something alcoholic, for example. These are all different ways that maybe use hallucinogenic drugs, even something like cannabis, right? What am I doing? I'm altering my emotional state. I'm altering my state of consciousness as a way of escaping the discomfort of like what's presently going on in my head.
Procrastination is not laziness. It is an
Mhm.
emotional regulation problem. What is a specific neural pathway that makes starting a daunting task feel like a physically threatening, and how can we rewire it?
Well, here's what I like to say. So I like to distill procrastination down into trying to solve like all my problems all at once in my head. Okay, so that leads to feeling overwhelmed. You know the analogy: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yes.
And when we feel overwhelmed, it's akin to a human trying to swallow an elephant whole. It's an impossible thing to do. So now we feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we're facing. Right? What do I do here? And so let's just say, for example, I want to lose 100 pounds or 50 pounds or whatever it is. When I think about that by itself, that's huge. There's no way I can tackle that in a day. And it could be a multi year process, even. That feels very discouraging to think about. And so it's like our brain has a region called the habenula. It's a failure detector and a motivation kill switch. What its purpose really is, in a simple sense, is to prevent us from wasting energy on something that we're not going to succeed at. And it's we could say it has a survival purpose, where when we used to live in a world where calories were scarce, where food was scarce, and we had to labor a lot to get food. So keep in mind that drives a lot of our choices, where we're still wired for a calorie scarce world, but we live in a calorie full world, and that's the challenge too. Um, and that influences our sort of default or automatic decision making as well. So this whole survival thing. So to get back to this habenula, this region of the brain, the idea is it's going to knock down our motivation to do something if we have this belief or this idea that we can't do it. And so what is procrastination? It's in one sense avoiding wasting energy on something that is futile. Another part of it is avoiding spending energy on something that just feels overwhelming. So I'm going to choose something else that helps me to escape this state of feeling overwhelmed by the thing I need to do. And then the other thing we're trying to do, let's just say we're burnt out, we're exhausted, we're fatigued, we're stressed. We're in something called allostatic load. The sum of all the different stressors that we are experiencing in life, that can be physical, that can be emotional, that can be cognitive, all these different things, is exceeding our capacity to recover from that stress. So now we're risking like burnout and overwhelm, and we don't have capacity to take on more stress. So we're going to push the task off and say, I'll do it later when I have capacity. One of the problems is if we have a pattern of behavior that's leaving us chronically overwhelmed and we're not focusing on recovering and helping our nervous system function better, we're not going to get back to a place where we have capacity. So we're then going to keep pushing off the task. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Then we're going to start to tell ourselves a story about maybe why we're a failure, why we can't do this, and so on. And we're going to start to shape our identity based on our pattern of behavior. But at the root cause here, it's a capacity issue, a cognitive energy issue here, a nervous system energy issue here. And if we can bring this back into balance, then motivation can return. But if we're in a state of chronic overwhelm, um, we're going to struggle to get anything done. And so what we end up doing is we try to generate enough stress, enough pressure, enough time-based pressure. Like I have to do this because in some way it feels like my survival is at risk. We might not use those exact words, but I need to generate enough stress to generate enough cortisol and some adrenaline as well to get me focused and alert for this period of time to do this thing that I've been putting off. And then we slide back into exhaustion, right? And then it
Yes.
becomes this cycle of like I have to have a lot of stress to get enough energy mentally to focus on the task I have to do. And then I'm back into exhaustion. And now we're caught in this vicious cycle of back and forth. And we go, how do we fix that? Is we first try to restore like your capacity to absorb stress and get you to the place of peak performance, because life isn't supposed to be stress free. It's supposed to be stress balanced.
Mr. Jonathan, as a board certified health coach, what are your
Mm.
short term and long term goals?
Ooh, good question. Um, Becoming a clinical psychologist, maybe getting a PhD in psychology, would be sort of professional development, the next stage of it. I already have a background in psychology and neuroscience, but I haven't formalized it through the licensing and certification process. So I'm working my way through that now, which is probably a multi-year process. I'd say honestly, like getting a PhD might take till I'm into my 50s because I got two young kids, and I'm okay with that. I think it's kind of fun to have this sort of bigger thing that I'm going to work my way towards. I'm not in a rush to get there. I'm already well established as a professional, so I don't necessarily need some more letters after my name for professional recognition. But now I feel very passionate about this as a subject and as a topic that I want to pursue in life, and so it really adds to a sense of purpose. I want to be a great dad. That's one of the things that I got two young kids and I love them to bits, and I, I think it's really important that I model for them what does it look like to be a good man. And I have this phrase that's kind of become I don't know, my theme for this year. It's a be a man of uncommon virtue. So in a world that wants to feed you constant vice, be a man of uncommon virtue. The reason I call it uncommon is because it is so like we have, like I alluded to earlier, we have access to all the vices in the world basically at our fingertips. Very, very, very easily accessible. And so the consumption and pursuit of vice is a very easy choice to make. The pursuit of virtue is a challenging choice to make. And so I have to remind myself this because I also have struggled with addiction in a couple of different arenas, whether that's digital or whether it's food and things. And so I remind myself that this is the person I want to become. And I need to remind myself of this daily. Be a man of uncommon virtue. Let that drive me. And it's not saying I want to be better than other people. It's saying I want to pursue my fullest potential with the gifts that God gave me to do the work that I'm doing. I want to pursue my fullest potential. And in order to do that, I have to pursue virtue over vice. And here's the key. If we have a meaningful reason why we're willing to be uncomfortable, we will forego the vice to pursue the virtue. And so we just need to clarify what that is. And so for me, it's being a loving father, a faithful husband, a consummate professional, always looking to grow and develop. And so that really pushes me forward.
Good luck to you goals, Mr. Jonathan, and looking forward for more success. And to be a good father is something else to the world. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a good father like you?
Mm. Be willing to forgive yourself for your mistakes. Here's the thing: if you have a good heart, like I'm gonna give you an example. A couple of years ago, when my second son was born, anyone who's parent knows like there's a stretch in life when you got two young kids and one's a baby where life can feel really overwhelming. If one's like struggling with sleep regression, the other one's struggling with um, just coping with a new life and someone else competing for attention and things like that. I remember one time I just kind of lost my temper with my kid, and I probably handled it a bit more roughly than I should have, and he wasn't really hurt, but there was something in my head. I felt like I'd crossed the line in my head, and it really upset me and it really bothered me that somehow I wasn't able to regulate myself enough to um, because he was like 2 or 3 years old at the time. It's like you know, anyways, a big part of this is like being able to forgive yourself and recognize that because what's amazing about kids is like you get like a million second chances. It is it's like God's gift to parents that like kids don't have a lot of memories before the age of 3 or 4 years old, um, and you just get so many second chances. And it's like I think just being able to be like, hey, I'm so sorry, I messed up this time. The big person here that's supposed to be the one that keeps you safe, helps you regulate things. I messed up, and I'm so sorry about that. And you make it right, and then you model like the new behavior. And so it's like you don't have to be perfect. You just, in fact, you're going to make mistakes, and if you can own those mistakes, and it doesn't undermine your authority as a parent, to own your mistakes. It actually shows them, hey, I'm not perfect, but here's what it looks like. When you make mistakes, what you do is you make it right. So oftentimes in our relationships with our kids, there's this fracture and then we reconcile, fracture, reconcile. But that's okay because that mirrors or models in some experience like what real life looks like. It doesn't look like this perfectly smooth drive down the road. There is going to come conflict. There's going to come mistakes. There's going to come interpersonal issues and things like that. Fracture, reconcile, fracture, reconcile. And it, so just, it's like, give yourself grace. As long as your intentions are, your heart is in the right place. If you make mistakes, forgive yourself, and give yourself grace, and just make it right and show your kids what that looks like.
Indeed. Thank you for that advice, Mr. Jonathan. For someone who has tried everything and feels their patterns are intractable, what message of hope does neuroscience offer?
You're not broken. What's really, really cool is your brain has capacity to rewire itself, reorganize itself. Some people, I just want to put a small caveat here. It doesn't mean it can do absolutely everything. Like a stroke victim can recover function, but they don't become the person they were before. So when we're adults, our neuroplasticity is not the same as when we were a kid. Nonetheless, we have significant ability to improve and rewire and reorganize our brain even into like our 90s or even past 100 years old. And so you're not beyond some kind of improvement, building new function, building new skills, growing. The capacity exists as long as you are alive, as cliche as that sounds. It's really cool to think that that actually still exists. And so you're not broken, you just need a different path. And it's not that you're doing something wrong, it's that you haven't found something that fits who you are and how you operate and fit into the world. So you figure that out, and when everything goes click, it feels pretty good.
Yes, for sure. And Mr. Jonathan, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101, love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Jonathan, if you could leave the audience and who people are watching right now with one fundamental understanding about neuroscience of self-sabotage that could change their relationship with their
Mm.
own mind, what would it be?
If you can show yourself compassion, that is the ability to observe your behaviors without judgment, you can change your behaviors. So compassion awareness is at the heart of this. So you have to bring your difficult behaviors into your conscious awareness to think about them. But if you have the lens of compassion, which removes the lens of judgment, then you're able to now create change. So if you can see yourself with compassion, you can then create transformational change.
Indeed, Mr. Jonathan McLernon. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're
Sure.
doing right now?
If you want to find me in terms of coaching, freedomnutritioncoach.com is my website. We didn't talk too much about faith, but obviously you can see from my Substack I write things about faith too. I call it Wrestling with Truth. It's just me trying to figure this out too. And so you're welcome to check that out as well. My Substack, Wrestling with Truth.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Jonathan McLernon, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering coaching to come. So, Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Moticon people, see you soon.